Friends, so good afternoon. We are so happy to be with you all this afternoon. I'm happy to report that as of today, about 96% of our seniors have applied to somewhere to have applied somewhere for college. So this is a really incredible feat. I'm really, really, really proud of our seniors for all the hard work that they've been putting in the past 2 months. As I shared with them in a senior seminar recently, they've grown so much since we started working together. And their growth has happened exponentially since we started the process in earnest in September. We know and we've been seeing the hard work and dedications that your children have been putting in, and I hope that you're also seeing and validating that work as well. If your child has not submitted an application, please do not panic. Please do not fret. Your child is not behind. Your child is doing exactly what they need to do for their own and respective process. So always know that unless you hear from myself or unless you hear from Lynn that there is a concern, rest assured that your children are exactly where they need to be. So the theme of today's conversation is really to talk about what happens now. So a little bit of practical advice about next steps, as well as an opportunity to hear from Mark, who's our upper school counselor, who's going to share some information about how we can support our students as they're navigating uncertainty now that they've entered the process of waiting, which for some is such a new process and a new feeling, and giving you some really good tips and resources to be able to support your children at this stage of the process. So if you had the opportunity to actually witness your child submit an application, this is what they see. They get a confetti bomb on the Common App. They're really excited. They get this box that says, "Congratulations, you have successfully submitted your application." And I know for a few students, I've been there witnessing the moment that this happens. And like the build up and the energy is so palpable. And then the second they release and hit submit, you see the tension melt away. You see the smiles return on their faces. You see the sense of pride and joy of accomplishing something that they've been laboring over the past couple of months. And this is a really exciting moment, right? One of my first questions that I ask students once they hit submit is, are you proud of what you just submitted? Do you feel like this is reflective of the best work that you can possibly do? And it always warms my heart when students, without hesitation, say, actually, yes, I am really proud. And if that's what your child is feeling, then no matter what the outcomes, I want you to remind them of this moment that they really have put their heart and their soul and their very best foot forward. And this is exactly what we can ask of them throughout this process. Now that your child, though, has submitted an application, or some things to consider when your child submits an application, is that they're going to get a lot of information that's going to come directly from the colleges. So this will be a moment in which they have to be very, 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 very diligent about checking their emails because everything moving forward will go directly to your child. So the very first step that the child should do once they submitted their applications is to look at their emails and make sure that they're checking the emails that they listed on the Common App. For many of our students, that will be their Brooklyn Friends email address because that is the email that they check with most frequency. But some students have a separate college email, and that is absolutely fine. But they have to make sure, and you all have to make sure, that they are doing a good job of at least once a week making sure that they are checking their emails for any information that is coming from the colleges that they've applied to. The first information piece of information that a child may receive is information about how to log on to their applicant portals. So the applicant portals ultimately is where your child will receive their admissions decision. So gone are the, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at this, gone are the days where your child will receive either the big envelope telling them good news or the small envelope saying, hey, something maybe didn't go as planned. When a college will post their decisions, which usually they'll give students maybe 24 hours notice or maybe up towards a week of notice, they will say a decision will be posted on this date at this time, and you must log onto your applicant portal to view your decision. So make sure that do have access to that portal if the college does indeed have a portal. More and more, this is common practices for most colleges, but not all colleges have an applicant portal. The portal is also an opportunity to track if documents are received. So it's really important that as your child is logging onto their portals, that everything that they are required to submit is shown as received, right? The most important pieces that they have control over, that is their responsibility, is the application itself, any supplemental writing, and any information about testing or self-reported academic records. The pieces that we are responsible for, which are transcripts, recommendations, and the secondary school report, that is what Lynn and I have processed through SCORE. Rest assured that as long as your child is good about updating SCORE, moving the college from applying to applied, and has submitted their early and their final college lists, this is how Lynn and I know where to send documents to. If anything is missing because your child never told us that they applied to a school, as you can imagine, they will have missing documents because we never knew, right? But it's important to acknowledge that this isn't an automatic process, that there is a processing and a manual process that happens on the back end for these admissions officers. So linking a student's application to their materials isn't going to be as quick as we'd hope it to be. And it can take between 5 and 10 business days for the portal to reflect completed materials. So if your child had an application that was due on November 15th, and today being the 21st, if their applications are still saying that something is incomplete, that was on our end, rest assured that we did submit those materials. It just takes some time for the application portals to be reflected correctly with the information that they have at hand. The applicant portal is also going to be another opportunity for students to submit continued information. Some schools want self-reported student information, such as testing. So if that is something that the school requires and the student must provide, it will show up on their portal. For some schools, students may also have to self-report their testing once again, even if they put it on the Common App. It just has to do with the various ways in which colleges process materials and documentation. So if a school is asking your child to self-report their tests, if they indicated on their application that they want their testing to be considered, they need to make sure that they do that. And importantly, help your child keep track of login information. In a past senior update, I shared a Google Excel sheet where students can just easily plug in their links, usernames, and passwords for all their applicant portals. If they don't use that, that is absolutely fine. Just ensure that your child does have a system that works for them because it happens time and time again that when a decision comes out, a student suddenly forgets their applicant information and they begin to panic. And on the day that decisions are released, that's probably the worst time to contact an admissions office because they're just so inundated with calls and messages. So it's important that they are doing their due diligence and saving and storing this information. If your child uses Google Chrome Key is a really great option to automatically store some of these passwords. So, as I've mentioned, and as if I haven't stressed this enough, make sure that your child is checking their email regularly. For some schools, part of some this communication may come via email or it may come via the applicant portal, but some schools do require what's known as a self-reported academic record. In the email that I sent yesterday, so yesterday's senior update, I listed information about how students can submit this information, as well as a list of colleges that require the self-reported academic record. Even though we submit transcripts to every college, if a college requires a self-reported academic record, the student must submit that document before the school's deadline. Otherwise, their application is considered incomplete and may be grounds for them not being admitted. So just make sure that if they are applying to a school that requires the SRAR, that your child is completing that in a timely fashion. Every student's unofficial transcript is on SCORE, so accessing your child's academic records is as easy as logging into SCORE, so they have access to that information. If a university wants to interview a student, that information will likely come directly to your child's email. And it could come from an alumni interviewer, it can come from a current student, or it can come from an admissions officer. And it's really important that students respond to those messages in a timely fashion, especially for those schools that care about demonstrated interest or for schools in which interviews are an important part of the process. If a child does not respond to the email, then that's something that's viewed pretty negatively, right? Then there's some questions about the student's ability to manage their emails and, other personal quality issues. So it's really important that if they're getting invited to an interview, that they are responding to that promptly. They may also, again, continue to receive incomplete notices. So if they receive information about an incomplete document and it's been more than 10 days, please reach out to me or Lynn and we'll make sure to see what's happening on the back end. If your child is applying for financial aid, you may also get information from directly from the admissions offices about additional financial aid documents or any other notices that need to be completed. And then lastly, for schools that demonstrated interest is important, while I've acknowledged how creepy this is, they can track that you've opened emails. They can track if you engage the links on these messages that they sent you. So if we've had conversations about demonstrated interest as it relates to the colleges that your child is applying to, just make sure they're doing their due diligence. And certainly, if you have any questions about demonstrated interest, please make sure to reach out to your college counselor and we'll give you more context around that. One of the final pieces that I want to emphasize is that colleges are going to be in contact directly with your child. They will not be in contact with you. They will not be in contact with me. They will not be in contact with Lynn, sorry. So if something is missing, if they're requiring more information, if they're trying to reach your child for whatever reason, they are going to take every single step possible to reach out to your child. Your child had the opportunity on the application to self-select if they wish to receive text messages from the university. And if they did, the college will always first try email. They would then text or call the student. And if they don't get in contact with the student, there's not really many options that your child is then leaving the admissions office with. And it's not uncommon, and it's been both Lynn and I's experience when we reach out to a college and we say, hey, like this decision, I'm really surprised by it. This should have been a likely what happened. It usually, 9 times out of 10, a college is telling us it's because something was missing. We required more information. We needed to get in contact with the student for whatever reason, and the child never responded to us. And we sent them 6 emails, and we saw that they opened every one of our emails and they never responded, right? So I say this because this is an important time in which your child needs to take ownership of this process as parents, as loved ones, as guardians and guiders throughout this all, it doesn't mean that we want you to be incessant about you telling your child every single day before they even walk through the door, did you check your email? But if you and your child have a system about when and how you talk about colleges, if you do it maybe once a week, then let that be part of your weekly check-in of your child, just to ensure that they're doing their due diligence and making sure that nothing important hasn't come their way. If you do indeed get missing materials that are showing up on your child's portals, there's a couple of things we want you to be mindful of. For some students, they may get right now a flag that says the mid-year report is missing. The mid-year report for us corresponds to semester one grades. So this information for colleges isn't due until February, and we will send out semester one grades as soon as they're made available at the end of the semester. So don't freak out if you see mid-year report as missing. That isn't due until February because again, that correlates with our semester one grades. And as I mentioned earlier, if it's been more than a week and something is still missing, or if it seems odd that the school received the transcript but not a recommendation, please reach out to us as soon as possible and we'll make sure that we correct that information. We as a school have a lot more wiggle room than the student does in terms of when materials need to be sent. So if something is missing, if it's past the deadline, it is okay. Colleges understand. The most important thing is that your child has submitted what they have control over by the time that the deadline does hit. But we do make every effort to ensure that on deadline days, everything is submitted out to every college. So the last piece of information that I will leave you all with, which is just a reminder of what I shared in the last couple of senior updates, is our final college list. And what the goal of the final college list is for me and Lynn to ensure that every student has options at the end of the day. We're really focusing in both on fit for the institutions and also ensuring that the student has an appropriate number of targets, reaches, and likelies, right? We wouldn't be doing our job really well if we greenlight a student who only wants to apply to reaches and then runs the risk of not having a singular college option at the end of this process. So our goal is to review every list and ensure that we're giving feedback on the balance of your child's college list. This list was due this past Monday. I send a reminder email out to all students who are missing this information. So I would appreciate your partnership if you check in with your child at the end of the day to ensure that they have completed this list. What Lynn and I will do starting today is that we are going to review every single college list. We will do it kind of like admissions committee style. We'll say, hey, here's this child's list, here's their academic profile, here's what we know about what they want to study, kind of the highlights of their application. Are they covered? Are the reaches, targets, and likelies appropriately listed? Is there anything that feels off balance? Is this list too aggressive? Do we feel that the student isn't kind of going aggressive enough? Like, are they shortchanging themselves in any kind of way? We're going to have these conversations as a collective so that you know and the student knows that when you get the feedback from us, which you'll receive written feedback, you know it's coming from both of us. And we're trying to give you, again, the green light to make sure that we have balance in your child's college list. If anything feels off balanced, we'll give you some context as to why, and we'll also give some additional considerations that you and your children may want to explore. Um, What's important to know, though, is that for these final college lists, it doesn't mean that this must be the schools that students apply to. We recognize that students may make some alterations, may have some heart changes of heart, and may make some slight alterations, and that's okay. But what we want to emphasize is what we've been emphasizing from the beginning, which is that students are making decisions that are thoughtful and they are well informed, right? So that in the next weeks ahead of them, as they're working towards completing regular decision applications, they're giving themselves ample time to do so, and they know what their plan is. What happens time and time again is that if a student makes kind of a knee-jerk reaction and a decision to change their list at the 25th hour, then they're not giving themselves enough time and enough care to research these schools and to write thoughtful applications, right? So we want to make sure that we're giving students enough of a runway to submit every application to the best of their abilities. So if changes have to be made, please make sure that your child is communicating that with us. And it's okay to make changes, but we want to make sure that we're being as proactive in this process as possible, as opposed to being reactive here. So, kind of this now transitions into our next phase of this today's conversation. It's really talking about self-care, right? Your child is entering a new stage of this process where they're just waiting. And the wait is bringing on a lot of anxiety for our seniors. And a lot of this is absolutely normal, right? This is nothing extraordinary, nothing that we've never experienced. But for some students, this may be the first time where they're sitting with something that they have no control over, right? We've done everything that's in our power to put the best applications forward to the admissions officers. And now we all have to just wait until decision day. And that can be a lot for our students. But there are proactive steps that we can take to manage and mitigate the feelings that arise from this particular moment. You may remember during our senior college night back in September that we posed critical queries for students and for families to consider as they're navigating this process. Questions that I hope you've grappled with as a family, perhaps have grappled with individually or amongst yourselves. But I think this is another great opportunity to have these questions reemerge, right? Because in the waiting process, is these moments where we want to make sure that we are doing what's within our power as the caring adults to reaffirm the value of our students, to reaffirm their amazingness, their inner light, their gifts, right? And to not let students lose sight of that. Because in this moment of this process, it can be easy for students to begin to feel that self-doubt because, again, the anxiety of the uncertainty is kind of taking center stage. So I want to re-bring up these queries that I would encourage you all to continue to think over and talk about as a family that will hopefully encourage and spark good, healthy, and productive conversations about the process. Because as we've been experiencing this, and Mark is a testament, a great can attest to these feelings, and so can Lynn and I, because we're hearing it. We're hearing students say a lot of things, and one of the many reasons why I love our students in our community is that they can be so unfiltered. So they're just kind of giving it to us how they feel, how they experience it in the moment. So I could be walking to my, out of my office, just getting some water, and I hear a senior say, I want to drop out of school. Or another one telling me about the nightmares they're having about college. Or another one asking me if I can call the admissions officer right now, this second, in their direct line to give them a decision this very second because they need it right now. Or like a student who's just saying, I literally can't. For everything that they say, how are you? I literally can't. How's your supplements going? I literally can't. Students wanting to feel like they just want to find out. Some students are feeling like, am I going to college? Is this gonna happen for me? Some may say, I don't know if I want to go to college anymore. And now we're talking a little bit about gap years. Or if you all should know this, I don't experience this as much as I'm sure you all do. But if I ask a question, I may get an eye roll. Maybe they cry for a second and then they'll be okay in a couple seconds, right? Typical behavior of teenagers, very, very normal behaviors and feelings, especially at this point of the process. But as I mentioned, there are active steps in which we can take to really be the best supporters possible for our students. And at this point, I want to turn it over to Mark, who's going to give you his expert advice about best practices.
Hi everyone. Yeah, first off, I want to shout out Frank and Lynn. I feel like just I've been a part of a few of these seminars with the 12th graders, and just seeing just how much thought and care they put into this process, and just the level of support they've given them has been just just really inspiring. And yeah, I just feel like I wanted to recognize that because yeah, I've had sort of privilege to be able to be around it. So I wanted to start with this quote because I was thinking a lot of just like I think like kind of where we are in general. And I think as a society, it's almost like there's been this rewiring that we've gone through over the last 10 years, especially with the young folks, or with the young people that are students. When we live in the world of social media, when we live in the world of smartphones, we are sort of so we're rewired to think that everything has answers can be given to us in the moment. We can look stuff up on our phones. We can get hits of dopamine on social media right away when we're feeling down. We get news reports right then and there, like in the minute, in a second. And so, in a lot of ways, we're not used to kind of dealing with the uncertainty and like the feeling of what's next. And so I thought of this quote from Rilke from the book Letters to a Young Poet that I really love. And it's be patient towards all that is unsolved in your heart and try to love the questions themselves. Do not now seek the answers which cannot be given to you because you would not be able to live them. Perhaps you will then, gradually, without noticing, living along some distant day into the answer. And I actually kind of thought about this with the student I was talking to who was like going through grief. I mean, and the whole thing that the young person was talking to me about was like, I don't know what to do. Like, what are my answers right now? And I said part of this is also just being able to the questions themselves that you're asking will be the things that you should probably focus on. And this kind of goes into what young people are going through this admissions process. It's like a lot of times they're sort of just like, I need the answers, I need the answers. And a lot of it is like, what we've been trying to tell them is think about what things that are coming up for you. Like what are the things that are like surfacing in this moment, in the moments where you're feeling all these ranges of emotions? What are some of those questions and curiosities that you have? Because in a lot of ways, it informs you actually what are the things that you need for yourself, right? And sometimes a lot, it's like even thinking about like the motivations that they have that's sort of allowed them to kind of fixate on certain schools and why they had chosen these dream schools. And it's like, what is that really tied to? Is it for, and being able to kind of think through this kind of actually help the process and in a lot of ways, like maybe inform them to be, hey, maybe this like dream school that I had is not just the end all be all, right? Because ultimately for me, I care about this next phase in my life or be able to kind of get to the point where I'm surrounded by whether it's the program, the kind of people. And I think sometimes they're just stuck with this is the school that's going to make all of that happen without understanding actually what are the things that matter to them. And so this quote sort of like grounds myself into that sort of thinking of just like, we're not quite there yet. So welcome the question, the uncertainty and then the questions And then eventually we'll get to the part where we live the answers down the road. You could go to the next slide, Frank. Thank you. So one of the things when I'm thinking about supporting young people, whether it's talking to staff or parents, is being aware of our own stuff as adults, right? And so a lot, obviously, one of the main things that we're seeing them experience right now is anxiety. And so, when I always like, will always quote this one, mental health clinician, Lynn Lyons, who's like really kind of one of the prominent figures in like dealing with like childhood anxiety. And Lynn will always talk about how anxiety seeks out comfort and certainty, right? And so we ourselves will find if we're anxious, we want the answers. We want to feel comfortable in the moment because just a state of uncertainty will get us, yeah, we're just rattle us. And so young people want that from us when they're feeling anxious. They want to say, give me the answers, give me the assurances that I need to feel better, or give me the accommodation that I'm asking for right now so I can feel better. But in a lot of ways, these things are just things that can help in the moment. It's just like a social media like on TikTok or Instagram makes them feel better about their self-esteem in the moment. But ultimately, we're not actually getting to the root of it, which is like, hey, there are still these things that we're going to have to be okay with. The uncertainty or the discomfort or the in-betweens that feel scary to some that are so accustomed to getting the instant gratification. And so just thinking about the things that you say when you're having these conversations, I think being mindful and really intentional about what you can say. Like we can't guarantee that they're going to get into these schools. We would love to say, you've done so well, and as a result, you will go to your dream school or your early decision, early action schools. That's just not going to be true, unfortunately. And so being able to say, hear them talk about the uncertainty and then getting them to the level at least where they're not uh just stuck there. So that's what it is with anxiety, is that we just want to get them so the worries don't disappear, but the worries get to the level where we can think, okay, what are some of the things that we can do in the moment, right? Because when we allow it to then become bigger than what it is, then nothing feels like they can accomplish anything, right? And so we always want to preach like avoiding these sort of reassurances. When I say external reassurances, it's like hearing from other people how they're going to be okay. And then it's learning for them to kind of build the internal capacity to say, how can I take steps for myself in this moment to take care of myself in the midst of uncertainty, in the midst of questions being asked or answers not being answered, given to me. Can we go to the next slide? So yeah, one of the just some actual steps is to validate the discomfort, right? I know that just seems simple, but I think that again, in our place of care and coming from a place of care and love, we see our young person suffering and we want to just make them feel, we want to see them smile and cheer up. So we want to say, oh, you're going to be fine. You're going to be great. And then sometimes they'll tell me like, I don't want to hear these validations. I don't want to hear these, and I'm like, yeah, because part of it is also for them to kind of just be in the space of feeling anxious and being okay with that, right? And saying, hey, yeah, it's gonna be this moment for you. We don't know. It's a scary moment. You've worked really hard, so because you care so much and really want to get into the school, I get why for you this is it feels so high stakes as it is, right? So being able to kind of just even like recognize that, or also just being able to kind of allow them to feel without saying anything. That's the other part. Like, part of what I do in therapy is sometimes when a young person is going through it, I just sit there and allow it to sit with the discomfort and feelings, because a lot of times they are able to then come to the conclusion of what feels right for them and what they need. And like you don't have to fill the silence with words, with assurances, with advice. Sometimes it's just being able to kind of be there for them, to let them vent, um, and go from there, right? Um, Also encouraging to approach uncertainty with curiosity. And this goes back to the Rilke quote that I mentioned, which is like really thinking about these questions to be like, what are some of the things that are coming up? And what is it that like is really at the root of why they are feeling the way they do? Could it be that they have to themselves, and set this sort of standard of, and pressure that is actually then impacting them in a way that it's become counterproductive. Where it's like they feel like they have to, or else it's a sense of failure that they have. Is it other people, external voices that are making them feel that way? Are they motivated by these things outside of themselves? Whether it's peer validation, whether it's comparing themselves to others. These things, by approaching it with curiosity, it will help them kind of understand a bit better than they would have, in terms of why they are experiencing this sort of anxiety. And lastly, focusing on things within their control. I think, again, anxiety can hyperfixate on things that feels like the problem and say, I need to have certainty and answers around college admission. But also, they're also stressed about classwork. And right now, anxiety is not even allowing them of things that they have to focus on, which is like they have to get certain things done still. And so maybe saying, hey, we can't give you the answers of what school, whether the school is gonna, accept you or not, admit you or not. But we can focus on just the things that you can do right now, which is like this essay, just do this, getting your grade up for this thing, making up work that you've missed on whatever class it is, whatever it may be, right? These are just steps that you can kind of focus on in the moment. And with anxiety, it's just being able to take the things that we can control and reminding ourselves that there are these things that are within our control that we can focus on. And that alone will just kind of shrink this feeling of I have no control in the world, right? And so just thinking about those things with them, it doesn't have to be necessarily be a problem solving session, right? Because I think that can be a little bit much also in the moment, but also allowing them to get to the point where their brain is thinking of what are some of the things that I can do and be in that sort of uh mindset. I'm not sure if that's the last of my slides, but I mean, I guess Frank can kind of like help me with this as well. But then the next step is also just like the holidays and boundary setting. And I'll let Frank kind of take over. But just what I want to share before this is that if there are actual things that you can think about as like, the parents and guardians, when we don't know what to do when they're feeling down, one ways that we can step up is also help them through the holidays, which some, not all, have expressed to be like a source of stress as they anticipated. Say, I'm going to have a ton of family that's going to ask me the same questions over and over, or do the following things when I talk about schools. And, here's one like actual very like tangible step where you can support them to, uh, in when you're thinking about the holidays. So Frank, I know you've had your moment in this. I mean,
Yeah.
your thought about this. So
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I think it's interesting because I've been doing in the last 9 years of doing this work and working in schools. Um, Sometimes I think the anxiety that students are feeling because of the college admissions process doesn't actually let them see what's immediately in front of them. So when we broach the conversation about the holidays and being with extended family and with loved ones, for some it's like it's not even an initial reaction of what they know to anticipate because they're just so kind of really in the moment or really kind of bogged down by the anxiety of it all that when we talk about like what do these conversations mean when you're engaging with folks, outside of your immediate household, it's really interesting the conversations that have emerged from your children. And we've had these conversations with all of our seniors at this juncture. And, for some, there is no anxiety. They say they love talking about the college process. They find it therapeutic. They find it really positive. They feel supported by their family members. And in those instances, keep doing what works. But then we've had students who talked about and have raised concerns about, that cousin that they feel that they're always in competition with, or they're compared to, or that grandparent or aunt who or uncle who they know are well-meaning and they know the questions are coming from a place of care, but either the delivery of it, the tone of it, or the back context of it can be really, really harmful or damaging. We've had students express kind of anxiety around, questions or comments about what other family members may assume about them based on what the colleges that they're applying to, or in good intention, recommend other schools without knowing or understanding the full thought process behind what got your child to the point that they are in the first place, right? So we always center the fact that this is coming for so many from a place of curiosity and care. But I think it opens up a conversation, and it should open up a conversation with your child about what they need going into the holidays and really thinking about what your partnership to them can look like, right? Some students express to us, like, hey, if my parent just says they will be the one to take the heat, that really works for them. And that can really affirm your care for them. Other students may ask you, like, hey, could you have a conversation with our extended family and name that they are not to ask me questions unless I bring it up. And if I bring it up, then let me take charge of what's happening here, right? These can be small gestures that can make the holidays a lot more enjoyable for all, right? And certainly, as Mark and I expressed to the students, every family dynamic is different. And what would work for my family, and as just true to my form, like I have a family in which I can kind of push back with humor in a way that I know probably wouldn't fly for a lot of people. But that works for me, and that's been my tried and tested truth. This may be a moment in which you have to have a conversation with your child, and a pretty honest one, about what you think would fly, what you think could work, how you think others may respond, and again, doing what's within your power and within your capacity to support your child in advance of those moments, right? So when you have your next check-in with your child, and hopefully in advance of the holidays, bring this conversation up with them. You may be really surprised about the way in which they're handling it in really positive ways, or the ways in which they've thought about it really maturely of what they need for their own boundary in a way that protects their self, um, kind of protects their self light without but doing it in a way that isn't also disparaging of other family members. So we encourage you to have these open and honest conversations because ultimately, as we know, family time is so important. And with your children potentially leaving home for the first time next year, we want you all to have the most joyous moments with your family while you're all together. So have these conversations, and if there's anything that we can do, myself, Mark, or Lynn, to help support or facilitate these conversations, please know that we are here for you.